Okay, what today's session will do is help you meet a federal exit counseling requirement. When students borrow federal student loans, they are required to be exited out of the program. It's not just meant to give you meet that requirement, but to also give you very good and beneficial repayment information going forward. And it's your opportunity to ask those questions, because 9 times out of 10, somebody else will have the same question. And I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, so if anything doesn't seem clear, feel free to raise your hand and ask me to clarify further. But it's important that you need to know what your rights and responsibilities are going forward as a student loan repayer. Okay, so let's start with the facts. You and you alone are responsible for repayment. You signed what was called a master promissory note. Your signature is on that, no one else's. So no one else will be looked to for repayment on these loans. It is a very serious financial obligation. Until loans are repaid in full, remains an outstanding obligation for you to fulfill, despite any failure to graduate or any dissatisfaction with education, even if unable to find employment. Still remains outstanding financial issue. These loans are provided to students by virtue of filing a simple form without any collateral with which to back them up. So there's some risk involved, and you are promising to repay the loans using future earnings. So, going to mention a couple of different programs. Direct loans and FFELP loans. Prior to July 1st of 2010, schools could operate as a direct loan school or a FFELP school. Prior to that date, William Penn was known as a FFELP school. That's where they had a list of different loan providers, lenders like credit unions, private banks, who participated in the program. You selected one, that entity provided the funding to you, and then ultimately behind the scenes there will be a loan servicer. Other schools were a direct loan school, but it was mandated after July 1st that all schools needed to be direct loan schools. So that's where the funding is provided directly by the Department of Education. So it's been an interactive and fun program the last couple of years, but it's important for you to know that you might have one or both of these types of loans. So the way for you to know is on NSLDS. What we've done is provided this particular flyer for you. It's called Locating Your Federal Student Loans. There's one particular thing I'm going to drill into you in this particular session. We'll see if you know what it is by the end of the session. NSLDS is the National Student Loan Data System. It's your place to track your loans. Only your federal loans will appear there. And if you have parent borrowers who borrowed the Federal Plus loan, those will also appear here. The way you access it is with your FAFSA PIN number. If you don't know that, try to find it. If you want to change it, you can do that. You do that through pin.ed.gov in this orange box to the side. It is your unique identifier, very similar to a Social Security number, so do not let it be compromised. It's your access to your loans. So I suggest tracking your loans, getting to know them, become familiar with how they look on NSLDS, because your loan servicers will also be working through that system when you're in repayment. All right. Anybody tell me the difference between subsidized, unsubsidized loans? I'm sorry?
Is it interest?
It is the interest. Do you know what the interest has to do with it? I do have candy for those who need a sugar rush.
The government pays it.
Yeah, you're right. Good. Subsidized loans are interest-free to students during their in-school times, as well as their grace period currently, and their deferment periods. The federal government pays that for you. So they are based on financial needs. So those students who file the FAFSA, you demonstrate financial need, you are awarded a subsidized loan. Okay? You are in a unique position because as of July 1st, subsidized loans will no longer have deferred interest during grace periods for loans for students who borrow next year. On unsubsidized loans, because they're not awarded based on financial need, the government will not pay the interest. So that interest is accruing during in-school times, during grace periods, and during deferments. Anybody elected to pay interest while in school? Yes? Okay, very good. It helps you, a borrower out in the long run, okay, not responsible for injury. It helps you out by saving you money. If you're paying interest while in school, you will not end up paying more than some of your peers will be. Okay, I mentioned the grace period. This is a time frame. It's a 6-month time frame following graduation, or if a student drops out of school abruptly or drops below half-time status. But it's a time for when loan payments are deferred. For graduates, a good time for them to get settled, find a job, those kinds of things. So payments are not due during a grace period. The lender is the entity that makes the loans to students. So for direct loans, Department of Education. For the FFELP loans, it's that private lender, credit union or bank. The student loan industry has been doing this wonderful thing the last couple of years. So loan holders, loan servicers are intertwined. Okay. At this point, what we've done is on the back side of this particular document, we've listed those loan servicers that you might be working with. Back in July 1st of 2010, when direct loans were mandated, the Department of Education authorized 4 different Title IV servicers to service loans for students. So while you've been in school and you've got FFELP loans that have been maybe sold to the Department of Education that are now federally owned loans, and you have direct loans the last couple of years, what the Department of Education has been doing is shifting those among servicers so that the hope is you'll be only working with one loan servicer. It's not guaranteed, which is why I stress NSLDS. Because if you're making more than one payment to more than one loan servicer, you'll have some organization that you'll need to have done. So get familiar with NSLDS and who you'll be working with in repayment. We've listed those loan servicers here. The big ones I'll point out to you are Sallie Mae, Fed Loan Servicing or FIA, Nelnet, and Great Lakes. ACS is the Direct Loan Servicing Center, and they originate loans, but they're also servicing. So get to know them, get to know their websites, set up user IDs and passwords, whatever you need to do to help you organize yourself in repayment. I mentioned the Master Promissory Note before. We call it the MPN. Very legal and binding document, similar to a car loan note, promissory note, a home mortgage, anything like that. Listed all the terms and conditions of the loan, also offered repayment information. At that time, typically students are not reading things very, very fully and completely. But if you ever need a copy of it and would like to refer back to those particular agreement terms, you're entitled to that. You ask for that through your loan servicer. Okay? Now, what schools mostly use the note for is a multi-year feature. So back when you took that FFELP loan your first year, you signed a Master Promissory Note. It was the note for that year's loan and the next year's loan. Then you had to sign a Direct Loan Promissory Note, which was active for that year's loan as well as the 4th year loan. So you have a couple of MPNs out there. Your loan servicers have those. When you repay the loans in full, you get those back. You get the original copies back, and that's when you have a party. Okay. I mentioned NSLDS. NSLDS.ed.gov. This is just a snapshot of how it looks. This isn't really great. It looks a lot different, but it's the best we could do on this slide here. Each loan will be numbered, and it will show the academic year for which the loan was provided. It will explain if it's in a subsidized or unsubsidized loan. It will tell you the origination date. It will tell you how much was disbursed, how much remains outstanding in both principal and interest if payments have been made. What's nice about NSLDS is they have a loan detail button. If you click on that, you get to more information about your loan, such as the interest rate, what kind of payments have been made. Then underneath each loan, there will be the name of that federal loan servicer. It is a hyperlink. So if you click on it, you get to the contact information. But we've been nice enough to include that here for you. We've mentioned interest before because subsidized and unsubsidized loans have different ways that interest is accruing on them. It's basically a fee that you're charged for borrowing the money, similar to what your interest rate is for a car loan, anything like that. It's a percentage of that principal loan amount. It will accrue over time on the principal loan amount. It's always been determined by the federal government, not by a school, not by a lender, not by a financial aid office, nothing like that. So Congress always sets the rule for the interest rates on federal student loans. Now in the purple box, if you are a member of our armed forces, thank you very much for your service, you might qualify for a reduced interest rate. So check into that particular benefit with your loan servicer. This particular chart is in your booklet, and it's necessary for you to know that because your loans have different interest rates. Prior to July 1st of 2006, Congress set the interest rate every July 1 on a variable rate table. We had an in-school rate, we had a repayment rate. Both were different. Then they determined that they would fix the interest rate on both subsidized and unsubsidized loans for 6.8%. That was the way it was for a couple of years until they decided, well, we need to increase some access, we need to see more repayment of loans. And so they started dropping the interest rate, but only on subsidized loans. So for the 4 years you've been in school, your subsidized loans have different interest rates for each academic year. Your unsubsidized have always remained fixed at 6.8. So you have different interest amounts that are accruing against your principal loan amounts. Your NSLDS will capture that information. For those unsubsidized loans, if you haven't been paying interest, it's been capitalizing. Interest capitalization does not work to your benefit when it comes to loans. It does for CDs and savings accounts, but if it's not paid, it increases the total amount that's repaid over the life of the loan. For instance, on a $2,000 loan, 6.8% interest is $134. That's about $11.33 a month over a year's time. If not paid, it's tacked on to principal. It's now a $2,134 loan. So 6.8% against that is now $145. If it's not paid, it's tacked on. So that's how it balloons that unsubsidized loan. You might be shown your principal loan amount on unsubsidized loans, but you have capitalized interest that's being tacked on against that. I'll talk about this later. Okay, now prepaying on those loans can save you money. So you get those nice cash gifts for graduation, pay down your loans. There's no fee, no penalty for doing that, but I'm going to caution you. What I've been hearing from students as I've been out and about doing all of these sessions on campuses is that they've tried to pay interest while in school or during their grace period, and they're having difficulty doing so. Their loan servicer either doesn't have the capacity within their program to start sending those statements to students or able to distribute those payments properly to where they need to go. So my tip for you is to be very patient and persistent. Persevere during your repayment cycle because these loan servicers will need to have, you'll need to have a good relationship with them, and you'll need to know your stuff if you want to call and ask the right questions. Okay, so if you want to start setting up those payments now on interest during grace, feel free to contact your loan servicer and find out how the best way is to do that. Now, what I've been told is that sending in a check is going to be much more beneficial than trying to make arrangements via EFT or online or something like that. You can always overpay on your loans. No penalty in doing that either. Just a note of caution on that as well. And I found this to be true a few years ago, so I'll give you a personal anecdote. If you overpay, what your loan servicer will probably do is pay down that next payment that's due. They will not address principal. If I were you, I would address principal on unsubsidized loans first. Has a higher interest rate, it's already been accruing interest, so I'd want to tackle that first. Your first few loan payments are going to address that interest pretty much only. It'll be a few before you tackle principal on unsubsidized loans and subsidized. So if you choose to overpay, you will want to, this is just a tip, send a check. Make a copy of that check and close a note asking them how you would like that overpayment addressed. Paying down principal on unsubsidized loans, anything like that. You might even number the loan you want it addressed to.
Can you just put in the memo line extra principal? Or is that not enough?
I am hearing it's not enough. And I would make a copy of that note as well. Okay. My personal anecdote is, several years ago, I purchased a new car using a car loan from the bank. And then I sold my old car outright. I took that check to the bank and I said, I'd like to put this toward my loan. She says, oh, great. Well, I can calculate that this will pay down the next 4.5 months of payments. Would you like to do that or pay down principal? To me, it was a no-brainer. I don't even know why I was asked the question. I said, pay down principal. The loan was at about an 8.5% interest rate. I wanted to pay at the least amount of interest possible. So that's what I did. So that's why I'm just cautioning you to make sure that you are addressing the loans that you want. And as I mentioned on NSLDS, each loan is numbered. If you have an unsubsidized interest or unsubsidized loan from your first year, it's probably got a lot more interest on it than this last year's loan. Just an example of how it helps you pay less overall. $24,000 in unsubsidized loans, that fixed rate of 6.8. Standard repayment plan is the same amount each month for 10 years. $276 is the required amount for each month, but sending in an extra $10 will pay it down 5 months early and save you nearly $500. An additional $100 pays it down 40 months early and saves over $3,200 in interest. And this is a true calculation. It came from our fiscal area. So that's how it can help a borrower in the long run. This is a list of the different repayment plan options. Standard, graduated, extended, and 3 income related. We'll address each one of them, but it's important for you to know that you can make changes to those repayment plans. Once per year for those FFELP loans, any time for the direct loans, as long as the new plan is longer than the one you've already been in. Just a little hiccup there. Each repayment plan has a maximum time frame for repaying on the loans, despite any deferments or forbearances that are authorized. So for details or for changing your plan, contact that loan servicer. Now, I don't claim to be a tax expert, so if you want to make sometimes parents elect to make interest payments for students while they're in school or during grace or something like that. But you have to be itemizing, and there's a couple of other requirements before you can have a tax deduction on those. So consult the IRS website for more information on that. The standard repayment plan is the one all borrowers are defaulted to. Once their grace period ends, repayment period begins. Everyone's loans are amortized into the standard repayment plan. Fixed amount each month for 10 years. It's meant to minimize the total amount of interest that borrower repays on the loan. Okay, so depending upon loan debt, will at least be $50, probably more. Now, another requirement of federal exit counseling is we tell you what the average indebtedness is for students from your school. This is for 2011 graduates. Total indebtedness was $25,711 at 6.8% interest over a 10-year standard repayment plan. That's an estimated monthly payment of $295.88. On NSLDS, there are loan calculators. You can amortize and estimate your loan payment using those loan calculators. Okay? Probably a good bet to put your total loan debt in there at the 6.8% interest and see what you can come up with in terms of a monthly payment. Graduated is easier to remember because your loan payments gradually increase over a 10-year time frame, usually every 1 to 2 years. You will pay a little bit more in interest over the life of the loan with this plan than you would if you stayed in standard. And one caution though, monthly payments will increase even if your income does not. So it's not based upon your monthly or your income fluctuations each year. Now, extended is for those borrowers who've borrowed more than $30,000. We've seen that isn't true for William Penn grads necessarily. But a 25-year term, what do you end up paying more of? Interest, definitely. Almost twice the amount than you would if you stayed in the standard repayment plan. This chart is in your booklets as well. Any idea what the national average indebtedness is for borrowers? 45? 60? 25,250. That's the national average indebtedness right now for borrowers. So in the standard repayment plan, that's $288 a month. End up paying a total amount of $34,000, $524. If you jump over to graduated, you can see that monthly payment is lower. This is probably that first or second year. $198, but a little bit more than, a little over $2,000 more. Okay. Now, if you jump down to the $50,000, look at those amounts. Those are pretty hefty loan amounts. Big time commitment. Okay, IBR, or income-based repayment plan. This is a new repayment plan just introduced a couple of years ago because that's when it was mandated that all loans needed to be direct loans. You'll find out why in a minute. FFELP and direct loan borrowers can apply for this one. And it's nice because for borrowers, they have to demonstrate partial financial hardship. Easy enough to do. in this day and age. It's all based upon family income, family size, where you live, your total loan debt. For those who are married, it's also based upon the spouse's income and if they have any loan debt as well. It's based upon demographics because it's also based upon poverty guidelines, which change every year and change according to where a borrower lives. So for this particular plan to qualify, you need to apply for it each year. Right? You might go beyond 10 years on this one, but it's nice to pursue because you will not pay more than 15% of your discretionary income in a monthly payment. This is just a unique chart. The one thing you should know is that if your monthly payment in IBR would be lower than in the standard, you qualify. For information about that, and your loan servicer will calculate that, you contact your loan servicer to make sure that you are eligible for it. What we're hearing is that there are many, many borrowers out there currently in repayment who are eligible for that plan, but they don't pursue it because they're not aware of it. So I mention that because a lot of our starting salaries are kind of on the lower end. You don't meet a fairly good salary until you're well into your profession. Before IBR, we had direct loans and FFELP loans. We also had income-related repayment plans for each. So income contingent is that one for direct loans. Based upon income, family size, total amount of direct loans only. 25 years to repay. So you pay a lot of interest, right? This is just an example. Single, married, your single payer will pay a little bit more pay a little bit more than the married borrower each month, but that married borrower will pay a lot more in interest overall. Okay. And then for the FFELP borrowers, they could apply for income sensitive. So it's based upon annual income. Apply for it every year because as income increases or decreases, so does that monthly payment. Still staying within 10 years though. So it's a little bit better repayment plan than the income contingent. Okay, important for you to know, grace period ends, repayment period begins the next day. First payment is due within 45 days. And I bet you can guess the number one missed payment? The first one. That's because oftentimes what is always heard is, I didn't get a bill. Well, it doesn't count. Even if you don't get a bill, you know it's due. Similar to when you know your cell phone payment is due or a rent payment, anything like that. It cannot be ignored. They're going to come and find you. But I'm going to challenge you today that if you don't get information from your loan servicer within 3 months of graduation, put a reminder in your cell phone and then call them. Because you want to find out what kind of billing arrangements they have. Will they send you statements via email? Will they authorize or send you a coupon booklet? Will they be able to take online payments, or can you make payments by phone? Now, I would caution you, though, some of the loan servicers do charge a fee by taking a phone payment. Now, unique benefit with the direct loans. It's a 0.25% interest rate reduction if you have payments authorized electronically from a checking or savings account. To me, that's kind of a no-brainer. You get a 0.25% interest rate reduction, you never miss a payment, you're never late on a payment. Okay, so for details about that, definitely be in touch with your loan servicer. A few years ago, here in the state of Iowa, we had a conference for financial aid administrators. At that conference, a default prevention specialist from the Department of Education spoke to us, and he said, there should be no reason why a student loan borrower defaults on loans because of the repayment plan options as well as the assistance options. One of those is deferments. Certain situations qualify a borrower for deferment. They're enrolled at least half time in school. If they are unemployed but seeking employment, if they are mobilized with the military, if they are serving with the Peace Corps, or if they're experiencing economic hardship. So seek that particular resource, especially if you feel you might be missing a payment. Before that payment's missed, seek out the assistance. Now, those deferments, the subsidized loans, still deferred on interest as well. Unsubsidized is still accruing, and you can elect to pay it during a deferment. Otherwise, it will capitalize. If a deferment threshold isn't met, then a forbearance is usually authorized. So it's a suspension But it works a little bit differently than a deferment in terms of subsidized, unsubsidized interest. Now, in some cases, your loan servicer can immediately grant a mandatory forbearance, and that's for certain situations like these. Immediate military mobilization, showing repayment can cause undue hardship, economic hardship, or if you live in a disaster area. And it has to be designated by the president, not a state governor only. Okay? So sometimes it just involves a simple phone call to your loan servicer. You might have to follow up with some paperwork and that kind of thing, but definitely look into it. That interest is accruing on both subsidized, unsubsidized loans during forbearances. So elect to pay it if not, otherwise it will increase your overall balance. When payments are missed or are late, a borrower is delinquent, and it does affect a credit score. All of those loan servicers are reporting monthly to the 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And they will assess late fees. So then there's interest that's being accrued against late fees as well as past due interest and principal. So avoiding that by seeking out deferments and forbearances are typically the answer. When 270 days of payments are missed, borrower is in default. NSLDS is flagged. Every school in the nation knows about it. Every credit bureau knows. Every lender knows. So getting a car loan, home mortgage, impossible. Your entire loan balance is due immediately, including everything that's past due, any accrued interest, so forth. If you hold a professional license, it could be revoked. You lose eligibility for deferment and forgiveness options. Negative credit reports are hard to repair. It's much easier to have a negative credit report than a good one. The Department of Education uses a number of collection agencies nationwide to collect on student loans, and they have very stringent actions and policies, including the use of U.S. Marshals. They will seek legal action if necessary. That means attorney fees, legal fees. And at that point, if a borrower is employed, they will garnish wages and they will withhold tax refunds. So they have ways of getting repayment on the loans. Some borrowers elect to consolidate their loans to help them in repayment. And this has proven fruitful for a lot of borrowers if they're working with more than one servicer. And they find that that's hard to organize. But it's not for everyone. You have to weigh the pros and cons very carefully because it's irreversible. Some things might be lost in consolidation loans. It will extend a repayment term for much longer than 10, 15 years, probably looking at 25 or so. So that means more interest will be charged. And you can only consolidate your federal loans. Your private loans you cannot consolidate. What's done is the weighted average of all of your interest rates on your federal loans is taken into consideration, and that average is rounded up to the nearest 8%. So it fixes the interest rate, fixes the payment over the life of the loan. For more information, the only loan consolidator is through direct loans, and so that's the site to go to. ed.gov is the Department of Education's website, fully authorized and usable website. Okay.
When you consolidate, you're still going to pay the same amount of interest over so like you get a lower interest rate, but it's just, you said it's the weighted average, so you're still paying the same amount of interest as if you paid all the separate loans? No, it would be the weighted average of all of those interest rates on those existing loans. So you have 6.8% on your unsubsidized. You have now 3.4, 4.5, 5.6, and 6%. So the weighted average of all of those combined is taken into consideration to fix your interest rate. Consolidation loans right now are getting about a 7.2% interest rate. So a borrower has to calculate how much interest they're going to be repaying and whether or not it's to their benefit to consolidate. Is that making sense? Okay. Do you have a question?
I was going to ask if it's on the slide. I was asking the grace period.
Oh, yeah. Do we have a question over here? Did we have a question? No, okay. Consolidation loans go into immediate repayment. So what a lot of borrowers do is they wait until close to the end of their grace period to issue a consolidation application. But it might take a while for that application to go through. So it's a good idea to be working with direct loans in order to see how long the processing time is taking. There are some deferment options that are lost in consolidation. There are interest rate reductions and some benefits that are lost. Some loan forgiveness opportunities as well. And so for those in the military, they might lose that reduced interest rate provision also. So that's why it's not for everyone. Weigh the pros and cons carefully. Because the only two ways that loans are discharged, and I've been asked this question a lot by married borrowers, should I consolidate with my spouse and that kind of thing? Well, that depends on the individual. Because in a dissolution of a marriage, that consolidation loan is split half and half between both spouses. It's not considered, who borrowed more when they were in school. Plus, if one spouse passes away, then the other spouse is legally bound to repay the entire consolidation loan without the benefit of a second income. So that's why it needs to be weighed very carefully. Only two ways loans are discharged, if you die or become permanently disabled. I'm going to point out the little purple box. Fewer than 2% of bankruptcy cases have student loans discharged in them. Very, very rarely are student loans forgiven during bankruptcy. It has to present undue hardship to the borrower, and this is after all of their other debt is forgiven. Sometimes loans can be discharged if a school closes or if a loan was falsely certified, probably due to identity theft. Or sometimes schools don't return funds as they should. That very, very rarely happens. So make sure you're looking at the options and considering your repayment plans very carefully. For teachers, there are forgiveness benefits. For those who teach in a low-income school for consecutively, full-time for 5 years, up to $5,000 of their loan balance could be forgiven. If they also teach in a high-need field in that low-income school, up to $17,500 could be forgiven. Those high-need fields are math and science and some others. Studentaid.ed.gov is the place to go for that. In their search engine, just put teacher forgiveness. You get to a home page that explains much more in detail.
You have to teach for 5 years before you can apply for it?
Right. You have to teach for 5 years in a low-income school. It doesn't have to be in that same school, but just a designated low-income school.
Okay, and like in my case, I'm a special ed teacher in Fremont, and the other special ed teacher I work with is on that as well. She was talking about the paperwork. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
To go to that website?
Yes, right. I mean, you can't qualify until after 5 years of service. And each year that low-income school directory is updated.
Okay.
And usually it's not updated until around October or November because low-income schools are designated by the number of students taking advantage of free or reduced lunch. But typically, you're grandfathered in. If you start and have worked 5 years in that low-income school and it might drop off the list for a year, typically you're grandfathered in. So you need to make sure you're checking on that. Okay.
And you said it doesn't have to be say if I move to a different school, that would be a low-income.
Yes, exactly. It doesn't have to be the same school for 5 years. It just has to be a low-income school. So you can change schools as long as they're still on the list.
Is that the same website that you would go to figure out about being a police officer?
Mm-hmm.
Have the same thing on it? So
Yep.
is the 5,000 and the 17, is that going to be the same thing for a police officer or that change?
No, that changes, and that's different. Actually, that's a good segue. Thank you for that. For those in public service, police officers, firefighters, nurses, public defenders, some social workers in particular agencies, they can qualify for public service loan forgiveness after they've worked 10 years full-time, made 120 consecutive on-time payments. The remaining balance of their loans are forgiven. Okay. Now, for these individuals, I would recommend IBR. Making payments according to income, you might not be addressing a whole lot of that loan balance until after you've worked there 10 years. So studentaid.ed.gov for more information there. Perkins loans work differently for public service. Are you Perkins? I shouldn't ask you, but Perkins loans have a different threshold of forgiveness based upon every year of employment. After the first year, and I think this is still true, after the first year you get 2% reduced. After the second year, it's 3%, and then consecutive 5%. I think it's after the fourth year.
Are there any loans like you pay off 75% just like that? They'll just cancel the rest?
Oh gosh, no. I wish. Here's a tip. Here's a tip for you. They want to collect interest. Similar to credit card companies. All right. We have a wonderful expression in the financial aid world. Live like a college student while you're in college so you don't have to afterward. But I tell you a story, a true story, about a young lady I wrote an article about. She owed $105,000 in loans upon graduation. She admits, yeah, I use those loans to support my lifestyle. She works for American Airlines. She's on track to repay the entire $105,000 balance in 5 years. She's paid off more than half of it in 3. And that's because she's been living like a college student after college. She's living very frugally. She's not taking trips. She's not buying new furniture. She has a used car, has a roommate. So it's possible. It's doable. I just had a lot of conversations with recent graduates, and it's doable. But budgeting will be essential. Number one priority in that monthly budget is your student loan payments. They don't go away. They can't be ignored. They will come and find you. So make sure you know what income you have coming in, what kind of expenses you have going out. Keep track of those expenses. If there's something you can adjust, monitor, reduce, eliminate, maybe do it. Use credit cards responsibly means paying off the balance in full each month so you don't have 21% interest tacked on. Pay all of your bills on time. Cell phones, rent, everything. It helps your credit. Your credit score is yours and yours alone. If it gets compromised in any way, it's very hard to repair. Monitor your credit reports annually through annualcreditreport.com. Don't go to freecreditreport.com because they're going to charge you for something or make you do a couple of other things. Each credit bureau, there are 3, I mentioned them before, you are eligible to receive 1 free credit report annually from each of those credit bureaus. So sometimes people set them up on a cycle. And track your student loans. And you do that through what site? NSLDS. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave this candy at the back there before you leave. Take one. The other great thing for you to monitor on your credit report is any chance of identity theft. 11 million people affected by identity theft last year. The number 1 age category, age 24 and below. So that's you. So protect yourself. You're out there on social media sites. You're buying things online. You're doing your banking online. Not that it's a bad thing, but protect yourself just like you do when you get in the car every day. Put your seatbelt on. So make sure you're monitoring the credit report. These are just some budget killers. Look at how much savings in 1 year if you cut out a few things. We're kind of an instant gratification society, wouldn't you say? If you delayed that a little bit, just had this conversation with a student the other day, you delay your gratification a little bit, you can live like you want to live after you repay your loans. Okay? It's $1 quarter, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And these overdraft fees, they are up to $35 now for some banks. Okay, so watching what you do, making those daily decisions, maybe dealing with cash a little bit more than you would in credit, helps you. Okay, now I'm going to step on my soapbox a little bit because I need to. Rights and responsibilities. You have the right to repayment terms, different ones with different lengths of times for repayment. You have the right to deferments, forbearances, cancellation provisions. You have the right to prepay without penalty. If you ever get penalized for doing that, you contact the Ombudsman's office. If you've asked your loan servicer a question that you don't like the answer, or they haven't held accountable for it, contact the Ombudsman's office. In the last couple of years, as this student loan industry has done a lot of this changing, the Ombudsman's office has been very busy, especially with consolidation loans. I know of a financial aid officer in this state who is still trying to get his consolidation loan in order. He's paid off a $2,000 unsubsidized loan, and it still has an outstanding balance when he looks on NSLDS. He is still working on it. So persistence, patience, and perseverance are going to be the 3 things you need to remember going forward. These are your responsibilities. I can't stress the address change enough. I used to work with Perkins loan borrowers at my former job. Number one thing I heard, I didn't get a bill. Well, have you moved recently? Yeah. We've had a skip trace on you for 6 months. Whatever you do for one loan servicer, you do for another. You call, you change your name, change your address, tell them you're going back to school. If you've been the victim of identity theft and now have a new social security number, you do it for all of them. You are obligated to repay that loan in full on time. Partial payments don't count. Make those scheduled monthly payments, even if you don't get a bill. You know it's due. It can't be ignored. And then contact that loan servicer if you need a deferment or a forbearance. Seek out those options. Always check NSLDS. This will be a good one, too, for those parent borrowers who've borrowed plus loans. Because it doesn't affect your credit if they're not repaying on it, but it will affect theirs. If you have questions, if you get bogged down and feel that you don't have any other recourse, call back here to William Penn. These lovely folks in the financial aid office would be more than happy to answer those questions. Sometimes it's just that familiar voice on the other end of the phone that makes the day a whole lot brighter. That Ombudsman, this is the contact information. Use it if you need to. Become that savvy consumer. Know what questions you want to ask before you get on the phone with your loan servicer. If you don't like the answer, as I mentioned, maybe speak to a manager or a supervisor. The Ombudsman's information is in the direct loan booklets. Now this is your takeaway today. It has all the information in here that was just on all of these slides, just what I talked about. Keep all of your loan information together. I highly recommend it, including bills. Now, NSLDS, again, can't stress that enough. If you have private student loans, whole different beast. Okay, so now you have your federal loan servicer or servicers, and you have private loans. Different repayment plans, different interest rates, probably variable or fixed, longer repayment term. Know who you'll be contacting because those private lenders, they have an obligation to send you information, usually continuously. Some privacy laws mandate that. So make sure you're opening all of your mail, keeping it all together. I worked with another student for more than an hour last month on all of her private loan information along with her federal student loan debt. It was confusing, even for me. So keep track of it, stay on top of it, use NSLDS